Yeah, we're live, and you can see got some new digs. Finally, have been able to move in, and as luck would have it, we have an orange tree. So I'm there's nothing better than a nice cold glass of orange juice, fresh squeezed. I'm getting all healthy. Did you miss me? I was gone for a while. Unfortunately, we did not have internet access during our move. We had some problems with our provider. We ended up telling them, hey, my wife said, look, I wash my hands of you. You guys are not getting anything, not internet, not TV, not any of that stuff. So we're going to go a different route, which is exactly what we did, which is nice. But we had to wait to get it done, and we did get it done, which is very cool. So all that worked out very well. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. Tonight we are going to talk about, and my first trip back, is the photo that I have up on the thumbnail. If you guys haven't seen it, is a 280ZX turbo. And the most important thing is to answer the question in the thumbnail, in the description, is the fact that the valve cover says turbo on it. Because if you have anything on your valve cover, you want it to say turbo, whether it's a 2.2 liter Dodge or anything that, it's got it on the side of your car or whatever, it's got to say turbo. Because then people know you're serious. I want to talk a little bit about that particular car. As a matter of fact, I'm going to turn this off right now. Let's see how that works out. Oh yeah, that's fine. Okay, now it's all bright back there. Let's see. I bring this out a little bit there. Just working on our new gig here. There we go. So on the 280ZX Turbo, I've been looking into that, and one of the reasons is, and I'm going to give you guys an update on the Nova, because the Nova, and here is the update. The Nova has a motor in it, and it is connected to the transmission. I'm not going to tell you what the motor is, but I will tell you that it's turbocharged. And I will also tell you that the engine that I have in the photo, in the thumbnail, was originally slated. We talked about him using that motor to go into the car, which I thought would have been cool. An inline six-cylinder, because the car was already an inline six-cylinder, would have been awesome. I'm a fan of the Z's. I've owned a couple of them. I still own one right now. But it works out just as well, because what I'm going to do probably now is buy this motor from him, this 280ZX turbo motor, because I've not run one of those. In fact, I haven't run a Nissan on the engine dyno. So I want to do that. I like that engine series. I like the RB. I'm also going to run that. And I wish that they shared the same bell housing, which would be awesome, but they do not. So that means the thing is with the RB, I already have the bell housing for it. So thank you for the guys over at Holly. They have QuickTime, I think, makes the bell housing to allow you to mount the RB motor to like a T56 or some sort of American 6-speed or 5-speed transmission. So that should work out good. So I have that bell housing. I do have to configure a bell housing for the L series Nissan motor. They came with a few of them came with 5 speeds. Most of them were automatics. Excuse me, but the 5 speeds, because they made so few of them, it's hard to find one. And now the Z cars themselves are going up in value, obviously, and even the ZX now is becoming popular. And that's always kind of been the redheaded stepchild of the Z family. All of the 240, 260, 280Z people kind of look down their noses at the ZX guys, because you guys ruined it. You made it into this cruiser GT kind of car, not a little sporty car like the original ones were. They were lightweight, and then they changed the suspension on the ZX and all of that stuff. But when they added the turbo, they added obviously an awful lot more power. They did a few things wrong with that, and those are all things that I'm going to fix or work around, because one of the things is that particular motor was rated at 180 horsepower, which is not a lot for a 2.8 liter motor with a turbo. This is from back in the day. It was very, very low compression, 7.4 to 1. 7.4 to 1. Part of the reason for that was we weren't in an era yet of sophisticated electronics, I don't think. This car was also, this motor, this L28E, I think it's an ET, I think. Did not have an intercooler either. It was non-intercooled. It was only running about 7 to 8 pounds of boost from the factory, but it was non-intercooled. It had very, like I said, it had very low compression. It also, from the factory, naturally has fairly small injectors. I think that they're 260 or 270 cc's. And it also has I think it has a floppy vane meter, which is not ideal, because the problem with that is that the vane meter, the fuel injection is working based on the vane meter position. But when the vane meter is open all the way, then it says, okay, I'm open all the way, I'm flowing roughly this amount of air, and I'm at this RPM, and I'm going to supply this amount of fuel. The problem is that if you turn the boost up, the vane meter position is going to open up a little bit earlier, but that doesn't matter. But still, you're supplying a fixed amount of fuel for the vane meter position and the RPM. I think that's how it works. If I'm not, you guys can go ahead and correct me, which I'm sure that you will. But I think that's how it works, because I remember working on these vane meters on a lot of other cars. The Chevy Sprint Turbo had this vane meter. We had to tighten up we put clicks in it, basically. We had to tighten up the vane meter so it wouldn't open up quite as rapidly. And then we worked on them on the I think on the Mitsubishis too. I think that those were vane meter cars. And then trying to remember if was the SVO Mustang, was that also a vane meter? Because I thought I remember them doing mass air conversions on those, maybe. So anyway, we've worked on those a lot before, and naturally, if I run it, whether I run it on the engine dyno or run it, what I'm thinking about doing is actually just running it in a car. So I'd like to do more chassis dyno stuff. I've done thousands of chassis dyno tests too. Unfortunately, I didn't photograph a lot of them or videotape hardly any of them. So until some that we just did recently, after I started doing YouTube. So like we did the Ish's K-Series Honda, which was very cool. But I want to do some more stuff where I can actually get the motor in a car and drive it around. So I'm glad that the new owner of the Nova didn't select that car. It would have been cool to have be a turbo inline 6-cylinder in that car. That'd have been awesome. That's just nothing but a win. But I'm glad that he didn't, and I'm glad that now I can get this motor because I have a 240Z. And so what I'm thinking about doing is I'm going to take this L28 and make some modifications to it, put it, upgrade the turbo, obviously, put an intercooler, and we'll go through the list, my list that I make of all my grand plans, and put it in the car and do a lot of that testing on the chassis dyno. I was originally going to do it on the engine dyno, but I don't think I'm going to. I think maybe we'll just get it. I just want to make sure. I'd really like to make sure that it runs. And as long as it runs, maybe we could do a stand start on it or something and just make sure that it runs, because I will run it with an aftermarket ECU, a Holly or something like that. And then we'll make sure that it runs, and then I can do these upgrades on the dyno. So to give you an idea, this is my partial list. This is what I got started with on the L series. And I have a similar one. We read about all the modifications and testing that I want to do with the 2.2 liter as soon as that gets running as well. But the 280ZX, what I would like to have is something that's near I'm putting it in an early 240, which would be a 71 240. So if this thing had 400 horsepower, let's say 400 flywheel horsepower, that would be fine. And I honestly think we can get there. I can get there without doing a ported head or cams or any of that stuff. I think I can get there with just making changes to what's there. The thing's 7.4 to 1 compression. Even the NA motor is less than 9. I think it's 8.5. So it's already a turbo motor, basically. So it'd be better if I started out with an NA version, because of the higher compression, you'll have better boost response, all of that stuff. But the things that I want to do, obviously, first of all, we'll have a standalone management system. We won't have the vane meter. When I wanted to do the testing on the engine dyno, I wanted to have a vane meter, and the owner that now has the Nova has a vane meter, so I can actually run it just to see what the restriction is from the vane meter without it actually controlling an ECU. So it'll work fine. Obviously, we're going to run more boost. I'm going to have to put a bigger turbo on it. I'm going to have to change the exhaust, so we'll have to run a bigger downpipe and stuff. I don't think I'm going to need to change the stock exhaust manifold. I'm sure that we can get to a reasonable amount of power without any problem using the stock exhaust manifold. I do want to play with intake manifolds. There are a couple of different ones. I want to try those, and I also want to make my own because I always want to do that. I'd like to make one that wraps over the valve cover because honestly, I think that this thing needs a longer runner given the RPM that I think that this thing makes from the factory. I think that this thing makes peak power at about 5,500 or something. So it tells me that it needs a really short intake manifold. I mean, it needs a really long intake manifold, and that the one that's on it, it might already be too short. So I'd like to upgrade that. So my goal is, or my plan is, one, obviously the ECU. We're gonna have to change that so that we can control everything. I can control the timing that I want, the airfield that I want. We would put ring gap in it. It might be that we don't need any, but we'll put ring gap in it if we're going to go to 400 horsepower, which is going to take 20 plus pounds of boost to get there. You know, we're going to have, because the problem is that these things don't make very much power NA. They're pretty lackluster in terms of the cam timing and the cylinder head and stuff that they use. And I know that it can make a lot of power. I've read all this stuff with, you know, Sharp and Devendorf and Paul Newman and, you know, all that, the IMSA GTO and GTU stuff. I've read all that stuff. So we know that they can. And there's lots of stuff on the internet with going forged pistons and strokers and all. We can do all that. The nice thing about a turbo is you don't really have to do that. But what I want to do is I would like to do it with a stock cam if I can. If I have to, we'll put a webcam or something in it, or a Schneider or something, a reground one, or there are other cams available for it. But what I'm obviously going to do is the ECU and then bigger injectors. So I'll put some 80s in it, some DEC 80s, fairly inexpensive. We'll put a big pump in it. Again, not a problem, a 340 or a 340 and a boosted pump or whatever, 450 or whatever I need to put in there. We'll put that in there. We're probably going to go oversized on the pump, and I am going oversized on the injector relative to the power output that we're expecting or wanting even out of this, because who knows, maybe we'll go more later on with the ported head and forged stuff. Who knows what will happen. But we're also going to run E85 naturally. It's a boosted motor. I have access to it. We'll run some of the stuff on 91 on pump gas and do some testing with that and show people what you can do with that and at the limited timing that you can run with 91, and that will work out fine. But I have E85 at my disposal, so I'm going to use it. And turbo motors love E85. So if I get rid of the vane meter, put a big exhaust on it, put an intercooler on it, which I'm still bouncing back and forth between air to air and air to water. I would rather use an air to air because it's I like the way that they look. I like having an intercooler core in front there, but I don't want to hurt airflow through the radiator. Not that I'm really going to be driving this thing that much during the heated summer months. It's not going to have AC or anything, but still. So I'm considering using an air to water that would kind of be off to the side. You know, maybe if the chili bomb works good at 400 horsepower, I'm thinking the chili bomb might actually work fairly well. So all of those are ideas, but it's definitely going to have an intercooler. So E85, big injectors, intercooler. We can have the tune that we want. So I don't know what the factory tune is like. Like, I don't know if they run these things at 10-1 and they run it at no timing. I wouldn't think so, given that it's 7.4-1 compression. You know, it can get away with some stuff at that kind of static compression, even without an intercooler. So we'll do that. To get to 400 horsepower, we're obviously going to need a turbo upgrade, because the factory turbo is not going to come anywhere near that. You can probably run, you know, I'm thinking that, I don't know, I would guess that turbo might be good for another 100 horsepower. So 250 to 260 or 70, something like that. You know, it's just a guess because I don't know the exact specs. I've never run one and never turned one up to the point where we've run into, you know, a flow issue. So big exhaust, you know, a 3-inch downpipe and stuff, and probably a 3-inch. This car, I don't know if it's still there, but it may have had a 3-inch exhaust on it already, because it had a kind of a hopped up 240/280 engine that had a cam and compression and side drafts and things like that on it, and a Tech 2, at least electromotive ignition system on it. So it will be interesting to see. I can't remember, but the exhaust will be big enough for us to do what we need to do. So with the intercooler, and then if I do some work on the intake manifold and have a good turbo on it, then it's just a matter of me turning the boost up. Unfortunately, because these things, like the NA version of this motor, was only rated at 145 horsepower, what does that tell us that we're going to get? How much horsepower are we going to get per pound of boost? That should be really easy math. That's why. That's why I made it simple. So your answer should be, Richard, every pound of boost on that 145 horsepower NA motor is going to be worth 10. It's going to be, every pound of boost is going to be worth 10 horsepower. Because if we divide 145 by 14.7, we get roughly 10. So each pound of boost, you're going to gain 10 horsepower, which is not a lot. I mean, that's why you always want to try to start out with something, with a combination that's making more NA power. Now, you know, we could do that. And like I said, ported head, cam, certainly more static compression would be a good idea. At least 9-to-1 or something, or 9 point, maybe 2 points up from where it is now would be good. And if I decide to go with forced pistons in this combination, I will definitely do that. It will definitely get higher compression. It's not going to run around at 7.5-to-1. That's like air-cooled Porsche stuff from back in the day. It's kind of ridiculous. And they were even lower than that on the original ones. So I honestly think that the stock motor, assuming that it's in good shape, and if I were to run this thing on the engine dyno, let's say, I have my list. I have my list. If we were to run the stock motor, which is rated at 180 horsepower and 202 foot-pounds, if we were running it on the engine dyno the way that we run it, cold, open exhaust, no flappy vane meter, optimized tune, I'm thinking it's going to be closer to 210 horsepower probably, the way that we run it, because it always makes more than it's rated at, because the way that they run it is with all of the factory stuff intact, the complete exhaust, and I won't run a header on it, but complete exhaust all the way back, cat, air intake, vane meter, all the accessory, you know, all that stuff, and with the factory tune, which I'm certain is conservative, even at just 7 or 8 pounds. So if I then put E85 and the timing that, without changing the boost, but E85 and the timing that I can run with E85, I'm thinking we would go from 210 to 240 or 245. Then an exhaust, we could, I'm sure with a 3-inch downpipe instead of the factory one. I'm hoping that the factory one's small and restrictive, that we're going to gain horsepower from it. I'm thinking that there's going to be another 10 there. The intercooler, I think, is going to be another 10 or 15. And then we start, from there, I think we have to start thinking hard about doing the turbo upgrade. So then we put a GT 3076 or a 3582, probably not a 3582. I'm thinking a 3076 would be good, because that would allow us better response and to be able to make the power that we need. A 3076 on that motor will certainly make 400 horsepower without any problem. So then it's just boost. And at 1 bar, I'm thinking we're going to be 320 flywheel or something like that in there. And then it's just 10 horsepower per pound. Beyond that, I'm thinking 400 horsepower puts us at about 21 or 22 pounds. So you guys out there, please check my math, make sure I'm okay. Yeah, we have a new office. Not only is it a new office, it's a new house that has an orange tree in the back, which is awesome. So that's my thinking. That's what I'm hoping would happen. I don't think. Oh, Nathan, your numbers are spot on. So there we have it. I'm good. I'm good to go. Go straight to the GT 3582. I don't need a 500 or 600 horsepower turbo, I don't think, but we'll see. Maybe the other one will be more responsive. The iron TO360 exhaust flows pretty good. It's solid, good quality iron. 87 turbo with 318. So that's my plan for the turbo deal. As I said, I've been going back and forth with the owner of the Nova. He sent me video clips of the motor being in and making noise, which is awesome. He's done a lot of other work to it. Brakes and U-joints and rear end stuff, and just because he wants the thing to be, he wants the thing to be driving. I told him, look, I will take a road trip with you, and it would be kind of cool. So I'm excited about that. So we should have like burnout stuff any day now, which is awesome. Let's see, 87 Dodge 318 making 175 horsepower. That seems kind of low. Looking for 300. What size turbo should I use? Is it 175 wheel horsepower? I'm kind of hoping. But for a 318, you need like a GT45 turbo. Those factory blocks have heating issues past 400 wheel horsepower. I can do all the cooling mods. Yeah, if there are cooling mods that we need to do, that's fine. And I'm only thinking 400 flywheel horsepower right now, not wheel horsepower. Yeah, and the orange tree is like seriously overproducing. It's an overachiever. The burnout video is not here yet, but it should be here. He's almost ready. Goodman, thanks again for helping deliver that motor. I found on the Suzuki G16B Turbo, I gained 10% horsepower per pound of boost, which wouldn't be more of a percentage instead of a specific number per pound of boost. Well, you can phrase it any way that you want, but the amount of power that you get per pound of boost is a direct function of the NA motor. Now that percentage goes up a little bit if you are also switching to E85, because you're not going to get gains really on a stock low compression NA motor with E85. I'd be surprised if you showed anything at all. But on a turbo motor with E85, you'll definitely get a gain, which I'm thinking it's going to be 20 or 30 horsepower. Dig up an LD33 short block and build a real L series. See, I'm not interested in that. That's the nice thing with the turbo is you don't have to do that. You don't have to make it bigger. If I want to make it bigger, I just put an LS in it. The L28 does not use a crossflow head, unfortunately. They do have one. OS Geiken had a crossflow head that was like $1 million. And it's much better just to put an RB in it. So if you swap to a trigger on the crank, you'll be more reliable. That's what the motor that came out of there had a crank trigger because they were using it for the electromotive management system. Did you catch Steve Morris tuning the mullet on the dyno? I didn't see him. I saw the post that Cletus did, that Garrett did, of the thing going on the chassis dyno, but I haven't seen it. We test with and without the turbo and also an intercooler. I'm curious what a good EFI setup will do by itself. The EFI system won't do anything unless the factory EFI, unless one of a couple things happen. One, the factory EFI does not deliver the proper air, fuel, and timing that motor needs to optimize power. Also, like I said, if that vane meter is restrictive at 145 horsepower, honestly, I haven't measured it to see, but I don't know how restrictive that's going to be on that motor. It doesn't have a lot of RPM, and it also isn't needing a lot of air. So at a stock power level, it's probably not that restrictive. But if that motor responds to, let's say, 30 degrees of timing instead of the factory only runs 25 degrees, then we could pick up power. But an aftermarket ECU by itself, unless it gives you something like that, it's not going to gain any power. Can you test the difference cleaning up the flash and port matching both the intake and head? Very minimal changes from port matching. We've tested that a few times in the past. Can I throw a GT45 on a completely stock LQ4 and daily it? Yes, you can. That turbo is actually going to be a little small on an LQ4. 2019 horsepower. Yeah, I saw some of the post had some 2000 numbers on it. I saw a picture of the L28 talking about that and the Nova. Yes, he's in the house. The Nova owner is in the house. I didn't tell them what motor is in the Nova. I just told them that I want to run the L28 ET and that I'm probably going to buy it from you and then do some bunch of testing on it and then put it in the 240Z. Is there any machine shop recommended in Northern California to machine heads? I don't know. Maybe Foreign Automobiles has some place that they use. The L series engine can make 300 horsepower NA relatively easily. If you cut the pots open, they actually have better flow paths than many cross-flow heads. Cut the ports open, I'm sure that you mean. Yeah, guys have made lots of power with them. If you apply yourself, you can get the heads to flow, and I'm sure that they're nowhere near what they could be even with the stock flow rate, because the thing has no compression, it has mild cam timing. Where have you been? I've been without internet, unfortunately. I've been moving, but and as you can see, I still have boxes that I'm trying to configure. I want to boost my Ford 25 horsepower flathead. I don't know. Maybe the little turbo that came off of the, like one of the ones for a snowmobile might work. Would a bigger turbine lower inlet air temperatures? I'm thinking about switching to a 78, 75 for my current 76, 65 on my 5.3 liter with a BTR stage 1 cam. I think what you're going to see is a drop in back pressure, but I don't think your inlet air temperature, if the boost stays the same, is going to be dramatically changed. I have not run the Aussie Barra. I know the N42 head off the 280Z NA car flows like garbage. Are the L28 ET heads also highly restrictive? Is that going to be a limiting factor? The head won't be a limiting factor once you turbocharge it. It makes it flow a lot better once it's under boost. Richard, do you have an Extreme Energy XE274 HR cam? I don't. Yeah, all of the heads will respond. Just that head and every other cylinder head ever made will respond to porting. I mean, if you make the head, when they cast the head, obviously there's going to be imperfections just based on the casting process. And also, when a production casts the head, they're not casting it for like maximum power or flow. Oh, Nathan sounding out. The 28 ET has a P90 head, and it's the most desirable head for any hot street setup, turbo or not. Yes. And more importantly, really, it has the turbo valve cover. Boosted Boy's got a BRZ for a case off. I like those little cars. I think that they look really cool. I think that they need a better motor in them, but how would I tune with a stock LQ4 ECU? I've seen guys with laptops on stock ECU. How's it done? You just use HP tuners or and Matt over at Sloppy has tunes, free tunes in his cabinet that you can just download from him, and you have to have HP tuners or one of those other systems to load it in there. But you can get a tune for a turbo LQ4 already, and he has that done with a specific injector size. The ET has better pistons, head, and cam over the standard L28E. So I'm surprised that the turbo motor would have a better camshaft than the NA motor. That's almost never done on any of the factory stuff. Will you be testing timing at all? Yes, I'm gonna run timing sweeps on it because we're gonna start out low. If anybody knows what the factory timing curve looks like, that would be awesome of you to send that to me. Does anybody know, has anybody actually data logged what the factory timing curve is under boost on the factory ECU on an L28ET? If you know what that is, that would be great. Because then we could, what I could do is, and if you had the air fuel, that would be just like golden. If you have both of those, I could mimic both of those with a standalone ECU, with a Holly, and then we could go, look, on a factory tune, here's what it will do. And now that we've thrown 20, 23, 24, whatever degrees of timing at it, now it wants to really wake up and make power. And then obviously if we put E85 in it, we're going to want to run even more timing. Jeremy, your springs will be enough. The P90 hydraulic has a more aggressive cam than the mechanical cam. Cool. Some seem hesitant to hit the like button. Come on, step up, jump in. The water's fine. It starts out at 20 and backs off 20 at full boost. So does it, are you saying that it stays at 20 or that it starts at 20 and then backs down to 0? There's no way boost or the timing goes down to 0 at full boost at 7 pounds. They wouldn't do that. The motor would just run terribly. Could a 4.6 modular Ford be reliable with turbo? Yes, lots of them are. There's a guy over out by Rio Vista that can get you the actual factory tune. Yeah, I just need some specs. I just need, like, at 7 pounds of boost, let's say at 2,500 at 3 and 3,500 at 4 and 45. I just need to know what the timing value is. I think there's an article with stock curve on timing hybrid Z forum somewhere. I'll take a look and see. I do go to that. And somebody asked if I was going to run it NA. I am going to run it NA. I want to run it with some sort of header or stock exhaust manifold or whatever, and carburetors on it. Maybe 2 SUs, foreign automobiles. Maybe you have that stuff. If we can run it NA, or even just run it with the factory fuel injection, which is what I'll probably do, because carburetors would be too much of a change. But if I can run it NA, then we can get a fairly decent baseline. Because my guess is if the factory higher compression NA motor is rated at 145, then I would think that this one, being a full point lower, has got to be 10 or 15 below that, unless it has a better head and better cam. Maybe it's the same. I don't know. The cam of the turbo is the old cam for the old 76 280. Okay. I saw Rob doing the CNC rotary motors. That's kind of a cool deal. He must be making lots of money. Oh, you got a 6-into-1 header and a carb set. I'm rethinking my thoughts as I was making them. I don't think we need a carb setup. Jamie, maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying is not making sense. Initial timing is 20 degrees. So like the idle timing with the spout out or whatever is 20 degrees and it retards from there. So it, okay, you've got 3 different EFI manifolds. That will be good. I was looking at the photo, studying the photo that I put up tonight for the thumbnail, and there's a lot of stuff going on that manifold. There's a lot of vacuum ports and switch valves and all kinds of stuff. Tom, you had a 260. I'm a 74 260 owner myself. Put a Holley 450 CFM Economaster on it. So did Clifford or somebody make that manifold, or was there an adapter for it? What is the best budget LS? They're all the same if you can get them from a wrecking yard. Is it possible to tune a desert race engine for 87 octane? What would be the losses be at LS3 stock head, manly valve? For 87 octane, you're just going to take a ton of timing out of it. The thing that I start worrying about is as you start taking timing out for 87 octane to not hurt the motor from detonation, you start running into a problem with high EGTs, which then can also cause detonation, especially if you're running sustained wide open throttle stuff. Factory turbo manifold isn't bad. Cross section measured of all the different OEM manifolds. I'm not worried about flow on it. And I can make a fancy. If I was going to run it on the engine dyno, I would have made some sort of fancy, like tubular one, just to make swaps easier. Yeah, Casey, you should have snatched up that Weber manifold and DCOEs for $300. That's cheap. You can't even buy a 45 Weber for $300. Made an adapter to bolt up where the Hitachis came out. And that makes sense. I've seen those that guys made turbo kits like that as well. Turbo valve cover adds 15 horsepower at least. And if you polish it even more, which I plan to do. A 260Z with an LT1 and a T56, that would be a good combination. Is the 6.6 GM motor any good? Yeah, it's really good. And you can make a million horsepower. James, I'm back. I've been moving and had no internet. Tom, what's up? Had my 6-liter with a 2.3 on the dyno today at a car show. Put down numbers to beat out a friend's 2022 Hellcat. How did you beat a Hellcat? I thought that those were like, oh, maybe the Demon is the one I'm thinking of. But isn't a Hellcat 700 and something? Those turbo valve covers are worth money. So my last one, a nice $300. Richard, have you ever tried nitrous on a Coyote? Yeah, I have the video up where we ran nitrous on the. It was a Gen 1 Coyote, but they're all the same as far as the nitrous goes. I often wondered what would happen if a 1980s turbo engine got a similar size turbo, but with a modern one. We just need to size the turbo to make the power output that we want. Just like with any motor, if we're running a 5.3 and we want 1,000 horsepower, we put a 1,000 horsepower turbo on it. So if we want to make 400 or 500 or whatever, we have to put that kind of turbo on it. The factory turbo just won't support that airflow. The Hellcat was 707. The Demon was 840. So a Hellcat should be 600 at the wheels, right? Hellcats are not fast. The Hellcats have really good motors in them. They make a lot of power, but they're pretty seriously heavy. Will an L28 even go to 360 horsepower with stock turbo? I didn't think that they would go that high. I didn't see Tom Nelson's new 5,000 horsepower twin turbo engine. What is considered 1,000 horsepower turbo? An S475 or an S480 would be that. Twins would be twin GT3076s or GT3582s, certainly. We're Fascist Pendant. We're discussing an L28 ET 280ZX turbo, probably the best motor ever made. At least it has a valve cover that says turbo on it. Skyline. Basically, I'm saying that an engine that came with a T360 got a GTX of a similar size. Okay, would be really nice with less lag. I don't know what. Oh, a GTX of similar size. Oh, a more modern turbo. Yeah, maybe it would be both more responsive and could ultimately make more power. The thing is, and this is the thing that a lot of people want to happen, that I don't really think does happen, although I want to see it. I want it to happen. They think that if you put a bigger or better turbo on there, that even when you're running with the stock junky turbo, in its efficiency range, that if you put a bigger, better turbo on, that even at 7 pounds, you're going to make more power with the better turbo. I want somebody to show me where that's happening, because in the turbo swaps that I've done, we don't see that. We start seeing that when one turbo won't support the power level that we're asking it to when the boost falls off, and then the other bigger turbo or better turbo can still support that, and then now it can make more power because it continues to hold that boost level if we have an electronic controller. I just haven't seen a test where when both turbos can support the power level and they're both running 10 pounds, that one turbo makes appreciably way more power than the other one at that same boost on the same motor. I just haven't seen it. We're becoming a mega squirted. I do have an MS3 Pro. This is an interesting one, so I wanted to go back to it. Have you ever had cylinder warpage? Ever had a cylinder warp on a big LS motor? No, I haven't. The Holden RB30 ET is the TO360 series, 360 horsepower. So is that must be a 3-liter then, right? Not an L28? The one, not like the one that we're talking about? The ball bearing guys, I swear they spool faster. I want to see that test where they show me that it's 100 RPM faster or 200 or whatever it is. Casey, you like the L18 and the 510? I like those too. The 4-cylinder version of that motor is also awesome. The other problem with these cars is the exhaust port flows poorly, just 100 CFM. That's not very much. I've run out of exhaust housing before. Yeah, if you run out of flow on either the hot side or the cold side, that's what I'm talking about. If the turbo becomes too small on either side, it doesn't matter top side or bottom side, then that turbo is too small. That's a different thing. I'm talking about people. What I'm talking about is when it's working the way that it should in its efficiency range, where it doesn't have excessive back pressure and it has the boost pressure and the power where it can support that. People still think, oh, you put a GTX 55 on there, it'll make 60 horsepower per pound of boost. No, it won't. It won't do that. That won't happen. A Holden RB30 is like a Nissan RB26, not like a Nissan L Series. It sounded a little fishy to me, but you know, so a 4-valve motor instead of a non-crossflow 2-valve. Richard, I'm late. Are you about to turbo or big bang? It already has a turbo on it. Lucky for me, it's a 280ZX turbo motor that I plan to do some testing with. Stock turbos limited to 240 horsepower. That's kind of what I was thinking, although I haven't seen people actually run them on the engine dyno. So maybe 240 at the 240 wheel horsepower would actually be a pretty good amount. Have you ever tried 91 versus E85 on a nitrous setup? Yes. But the E85, if it doesn't add power NA, it's not going to add power under nitrous. The nitrous just adds to whatever is there. If you have a turbo, if you have a blower, if you have an NA motor, if you have high compression, if you have low compression, whatever your starting point is, the nitrous just adds to that. Routinely spin my L24 to 7,500. So your 240 engine would go to 7,500. You must have had stuff done to it, like a cam and a better intake manifold and stuff, because a stock one doesn't want to make power up there, obviously. You make 69 horsepower per pound of boost. That's good. So then I could tell you exactly how much power your NA motor makes. So at 70 horsepower or 69 horsepower per pound of boost, you have 1,000 horsepower NA motor, right? Skyline. No, the RB30E was a single overcam 2-valve engine. Also, it did use a crossflow head. Also, the RB engine used a timing belt instead of a timing chain. 240 wheel horsepower would be a lot of fun at 240. It would really be. Best horsepower per dollar engine, I don't know, just whatever one you have. Okay, Dean, so now you're confusing everybody by throwing out a whole bunch of stuff when we were talking about kind of stock motors. Delicious Life, welcome. Oh, tonight's poll, that's right. We only have 15 minutes left. And OS Geiken head, yeah, those are like $8 million. I need to do a GoFundMe page for an OS Geiken head. We're going to use a Mega Squirt, probably the Holly. I'm thinking, although I do have the MS3 Pro. Cam, ported head, intake, headers, light and rotating assembly, fly, yeah, aluminum flywheel, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, we've seen racing motors. I've run when I was running showroom stock SSGT, we ran with IT cars, so lots of IT cars were nicely done. Whether it's a Mega Squirt or Holly doesn't matter really, for as long as either one of those could give me the right air fuel and timing, and that's all that matters. As long as we have, if we want 20 degrees and we get 20 degrees, that's the important thing. If we want 11.5 to 1 air fuel and we get 11.5 to 1, that's the thing. I really don't care which one of the things gives that to me, as long as it does that. Properly efficient turbo gives you 6.6 more power per pound of boost. That's very scientific. The garage in this is actually very small, but the 2.2 liter Dodge Omni does fit in there. I haven't run any 2.2 stuff right now. It's funny, is most of that had to come off the car when I turned it from an IPS to a BSP solo car. Yeah, unfortunately. Although in IT, and this was a lot of years ago, but as an IT car, the Z's did really, really well because you can make them handle really good. Yeah, 6.7% seems more realistic to me. There's also a head called the LZ head. I saw a test, I remember seeing way back, of the OS Geiken head, and it was not very much power. It's certainly not enough to spend the money it would take to buy that thing and swap it. Fix the 2.5 and put it back in. Have some fun before you get it inspected. People are mentioning tuner guys, and I got a lot of respect for guys that actually tune stuff that actually drives around, but nobody tuning can make more power than we can on the engine dyno by giving it the right air fuel and timing. Nobody else's magic touch does anything else. If we run it from 11 to 1 to 12 to 1 on a turbo motor and figure out how much power it makes, and then we sweep the timing from 20 to 24 degrees or whatever, no amount of magic by anybody else can come in and make that any better. People don't understand that, but that's reality. People think that there's magic in a tune, and there's, at wide open throttle, there really isn't. Casey, I still may have a set of ball joint spacers for a C around somewhere. That'd be great. Those 3 trophies right there are all land speed records from Bonneville. Those are, it's hard for you to see, but those are all Mickey Thompson cars on top of there, which is kind of awesome. I'm pretty familiar with the L series stuff because I've owned a couple of them now, and I did a bunch of stuff to my 260Z, and then my buddy has that I got this 240 from, and my other buddy Bernie had one, and so we've been down the L series trail. Have you ever compared lean burn versus rich burn on NA engines to see which makes more power? Would we run a motor at wide open throttle at 14.3 to 1? No, because when we're running stuff on the engine dyno and we're running an NA motor and we start leaning the thing out, we start leaning it out until it stops making power, and then we don't go any further than that. The magic in the tune is the street manners. Yes, I agree. I 100%. That's why I tell everybody that I'm not a tuner. I get asked multiple times a day, hey, can you send me the tune, or can you tune this for me? And I'm like, no, I'm not that guy. If you want me to tune the top 2 cells going across your Holly at wide open throttle for an engine dyno run, I can do that in 5 pulls. No problem at all. It'll be spot on. But it's not going to drive, and it's not going to shift, and it's not going to do all the other, and start and idle and cold start and do all those things that make tuners. That's why they get paid the money that they do. Jonathan, I have a 318, 8.7 to 1 compression, max ported. I wish somebody would just say partially ported, mildly ported. 178 valves, ported performer intake. Okay, Edelbrock 600 headers, cam 256. What horsepower am I? It's without knowing your head porting, like how much it flows or anything. An Edelbrock 600, I would say that that's going to be probably something south of 400. Tune is critical for racing and drivability if you want to win. That's what I said. The guys that tune stuff for things that actually go out and drive and race and do all that, that's not me. But at wide open throttle, there's no more there. Jonathan, I'm trying to think about. I've never run. Well, I've run one 318, and I think that it was in the mid. I want to say it was in the mid to high 300s. It had a cam. It had ported heads. It had more compression than that. It had a bigger carburetor than that. It had a dual plane. Let me see. I can tell you what it made. I just need to go to my dyno, my fancy dancy dyno results here. So we need to go to dyno results. We need to go to Dodge Magnum. Holding our 318 Dodge. Timing. Let's see where we're at. Okay, so we've got yeah, 369 horsepower and 430 foot-pounds. Final test description. RPM air gap, Holly 750. Whatever headers they supplied, the camshaft unfortunately is unknown. It was a 318. So if that gives you any idea. There won't be any poll tonight. And James, remember the flying brick? That's right. That was the Mustang. My buddy got a 1974 H5 Olds Cutlass. Nice. For $400. so we need a poll. Okay, we'll do a quick poll because maybe I'll stay, a couple extra minutes. 2 more minutes. Will the L, get the L out of here, L28 ET Turbo ZX motor make 400 flywheel horsepower at 22 PSI on E85? Will the L28 ET Turbo ZX motor make 400 flywheel horsepower at 22 PSI on E85? And I'm going to add to that a little bit. Hey, what's going on here? With a stock cam and head and short block. Okay, there we go. There's our pull fraction. And on the pull, that's not even the pull. Dang it. There we go. Ask our community. We're the near stock L28 ET motor make, 400 flywheel horsepower at 22 PSI. So for you nitpickers out there, it's obviously going to have injectors. We already have a pump on it. It's going to have an intercooler. It's going to have a big turbo. It'll have an exhaust. But it'll have a stock intake manifold and throttle body, right? Yeah, throttle body. Stock head, stock cam, stock bottom end. It's going to have ring gap because it's going to take a lot of boost. It won't have a stock turbo. I mean, you can't make 400 flywheel horsepower with a stock turbo. It will have a turbo upgrade. Just the basic part of the motor is a stock part. No, it can't make it with a stock turbo. It has to have a turbo upgrade and an intercooler. Stock long block and intake. Yep, fresh squeezed OJ and new digs. Not sure if you covered is the L28 for a fun drivable build. Yeah, it's so that I can drive the car around. Right now, I have a 71 240. It does not have a motor in it. So it needs an L28, and everything needs a turbo with a 5-speed in it, just so that I can drive it around. I also have the RB25, which could easily go in it. I don't have a trans for that. I wish I had a 5-speed transmission for that, because honestly, that motor looks better than the L28 does. It's more awesomer. But a turbo L28 in there would be fun to drive around, especially at 15 or 20 pounds of boost or whatever. Aiden, that's a lot of horsepower. The L28 will not have a ported head or cam or anything. It'll just be all stock. And an RB30 ET never made 800 horsepower, Dean. Sorry. Never say never. Do you have a transmission for the L28, factory T5 or L series 5-speed? It's fine. I recommend a built 6262 turbo or a GTX 3582. A GTX 3582R would be more turbo than we need for 400 horsepower. A VG30 is better, is more better. Maybe that's what needs to go in there, right? Right, Foreign? Good luck with the distributor. So how's our poll doing? 72% saying yes. D25, 550. Is the flat top Chevy 3.1 any good for power? I've run a turbo on the 3100s on the V6, if that's the one you're asking about. Jamie, you'll get 300 horsepower. I guarantee you it will make more than 300 flywheel horsepower at 22 pounds. I've got plenty of turbos. I can put a I can put a 7875 on there if I want, or a T4 S475, or I mean, there's a lot of them. Is that no? That's not actually. That's actually a pellet gun. But I do have a Mossberg. First thing you need to do is have the head completely ported properly and complete new valve jobs, reverse cutting on the lace. No, it doesn't need any of that. I know that that will improve power. I know that porting the head will help it. But what we're trying to do is not do that. An air-to-water intercooler would help things a lot. And I could just run ice water on it. Shotguns shoot pellets. They just shoot a lot of them at the same time, right? I've been going down the rabbit hole lately on 12 gauge and 20 gauge stuff on YouTube with all the weird exotic like slug designs. And of course the 700 nitro stuff too. It's very cool. Because the only thing better than an elephant gun is a double elephant gun. 74% saying yes. Would you rather have a supercharger or a turbo? A turbo seems like a pain with all the plumbing. You get to pick the one that you like. The nice thing about this is that we have all of these things to choose from. You want a supercharger? You pick a. In fact, you could pick up any number of different kinds of superchargers. Or a turbo, they all work. I have not got my head back from David Vizard yet, although I did talk to him the other day. Unfortunately, his partner passed away, Not a good situation. And I told him, look, there's no hurry. I don't even have the motor up and running right now, so I'm not worried about it. Is nitrous practical for a daily? Yes, I ran it on my Mustang for years, and I probably went through I don't know, I want to say 20 or 30 bottles, and it might actually be more than that, but we used it all the time. Every form of force induction has its own thing that makes it desirable and then makes it not desirable. And the not desirable thing is the thing that the other side, like the turbo guys, talk about belt slippage or, the parasitic losses. And then the blower guys talk about the turbo lag, and, and then they argue back and forth. The reality is that all of them can be made to work really well, and you can make lots of power. Gail Banks decided to twin charge the Duramax. I saw that. An M90 supercharger with a GT45 on a 6-liter. Yeah, that's the wrong way to go. You guys can do that, but even twin charging is not. It doesn't give you the best of both worlds. It also gives you the worst of both worlds. Although it does eliminate boost response problems. Shotgun shells are hard to get now. Yeah, Jerry, I didn't know about it until I talked to David. Supercharged Mazda Millennia, that also has a Miller cycle engine in it. I don't know how a VW at 1.8T turbo has those things made peak torque at 1800 RPM. It shouldn't be very laggy. 0666 going to be close to that 400 horsepower, 22 psi, an old school. Oh, a CarTech kit back in the day. Nice, 260 in the late 90s. It's a fun car, but the Makunis, yeah, they look really cool though, and blowing through them is an awesome thing. I didn't know that. I guess they were doing Makunis. I thought that they were doing DeLordos too. I know that they weren't doing Webers, but having side drafts on there looks awful cool though. No, Marvin is the guy that Charles that passed away. Fascists. This is always my response to people that talk about being sensitive to turbo lag. On your NA motor, you have turbo lag all the time. It never comes into boost. So all you have is turbo lag. You never have the positive side of boost. All you have is the lag. Are you ever going to be a regular on Engine Masters? Probably not. They have that pretty well situated. Turbos in general are easier on bearings than the blower. No, I don't think that there's an issue with bearings on those. Twin T3, T4 turbos on a VG 300 ET for 600 horsepower on a stock bottom end sound reasonable. The problem is that you saying that T3, T4 turbos, I don't know what size they are. You just have to size the turbos for that power level. And the stock bottom end, I definitely would put ring gap on. Oh, foreign, you want to do a big bang on the VG30? Is the VG that you have, is that actually a turbo motor, or is that an NA one? The one thing I could say about the bearing issue on blower stuff is we did have proportionately more wear on the front main bearing on stuff where we had to put a lot of belt tension on centrifugal blowers. So that might be an issue. There might also be a frequency thing there. Charles, you want to see an FE? I'm working on an FE. You can boost a VG30 ET and make 600, but not for long. Draw through carburetor is another thing on my wish list. The motor in your Audi, where your 1.8 is the same as the Volkswagen one. Sorry, Dean, I don't believe any of those numbers. Jonathan, I still have the slant 6, and I'm going to put it back together. As a matter of fact, it's just sitting with the short block there. Goodman, you did the math, and it's 400 to 405. I might have access to a 390 FE, which would be good. And on the slant 6, I definitely will run boost on it of some kind. I know Dulcich has had bad luck with when he's tried to boost some of these, and I don't know what the issue is. Maybe it's a distribution issue. The other thing that I'm really looking forward to is, and I like the fact that it will bolt right up to the stuff that we have, is a 300 Ford, the inline 6-cylinder. Because I want to show people that inline 6-cylinders don't make more torque than V8s do. Or maybe they do. I want to show whatever happens. I want to show whatever happens. Will the near stock L18 motor make 400 flywheel horsepower at 22 PSI? I got 76% saying yes. What is Richard's favorite engine to work on? It's whatever the next one is. I don't know, Casey, I don't know if it's Phillips or Flathead. Yes, definitely have to flip the pistons. Do a 300 Ford with cut up LS LS heads. That seems like an awful lot of work. Although it does need more head flow, I'm sure. I just want to play with the intake manifold on the 300. I haven't ever run one of those, so I think it would be cool. Yeah, Goodman, I did the math on it, and that's, because I have my list. I have my list of where I need to be. With a slant 6, you have to port the head. And Dulcich did that. In fact, he went through 3 or 4 heads porting them because he kept hitting water. Unfortunately, he was trying to get a little aggressive on the porting. But the one that they ran not too long ago for Engine Masters, that they ran the torque storm on, they had problems with. Foreign, you've got long tubes. Nice for the 300. Yeah, that would be cool. Jamie, you guys are insane thinking you're going to get 400 horsepower with a stock intake. So you think that the intake manifold is going to be restrictive? Uncle Tony made some interesting slant 6 mods. He welded combustion chambers to have quench zones. He probably would not be the guy that I would go get engine building tips from. Dulcich would be much better at that than Tony is. He's not really an engine guy. I like Gelbank's theory about V8s having more valves to get air in and out than a 6-cylinder. We've talked about that before here, and that's that if you have a V6 head and a V8 head and they flow the same and the displacement of the engine is the same, the V8 should make more power. And the reason for that is that it flows the same per cylinder, but you have more cylinders. So if both of the heads flow 200 CFM, but you only have 6 of those, it's harder for that to support that cylinder flow. On a V8, the displacement is smaller per cylinder. So it actually works out better that way a lot of times. Yeah, Nathan, I don't, a lot of people don't have an idea of what we're talking about here sometimes. It's almost never a good idea to say that will never happen, because then the one time that it does, then you were wrong. Skyline, I've heard that the 280ZX turbo has a 60 millimeter throttle body. When we're blowing through it, it's not going to be an issue. Dulcich is actually a lot smarter and more capable than people give him credit for. And he gets a lot of credit, but he doesn't get nearly enough. He's actually really, really sharp, which is why he was an engine, he was in Engine Masters and stuff. And if there was a competition between Dulcich and Uncle Tony in building motors, it would just not even be close. Yeah, and Dulcich is just a really cool guy to be around. I've owned one diesel. I had a Dodge Cummings that we did stuff to. We just did programmers and raise the boost, stuff like that, but not anything on an engine dyno. Uncle Tony knows the old classic cars, and if I had a question about what was on a factory Hemi or a 440 or something like that, he would be the guy to go to, but he would not be a guy that I would go to talk to about engine stuff. He's not an engine guy. I've had conversations with him. Dulcich is a real engine guy. He understands, and not only that, is irrespective of the engine thing, the stuff that he knows about is like tremendous. Suspension and painting and interior and just everything. It's really amazing. He really is like a Renaissance man. Yeah, Freiberger and Dulcich have been friends for a really long time. What is Dulcich like in real life? He's a regular guy. He's a real car guy. How aggressive are the L28 cam specs, and how well does that head flow, and how high can you safely rev it? You're asking the wrong questions. For at least for our needs, I'm going to go ahead and close out this thing. But for our needs, you don't have to worry about revving it, because we don't have to rev it to make power. You can in race applications. You can port the head. You can put more cam timing in it. You can add static compression. Have a header, short runner, side draft, intake manifolds. You can do all that stuff, and the motor will rev and it will make power. For what we're doing, RPM is not important. For what we're doing is, let's do all the things that I talked about on my list to bring the power up, and then we just start adding boost. And as long as our air, fuel, and timing is right, and as long as this thing will withstand the kind of cylinder pressure that we're talking about, it will make the power. And it doesn't have to do it at 7,500. In fact, it's going to do it probably at less than 6,000. And it might behoove us to put a rising boost curve in this thing. I did the porting on my 318 hits from what I learned from Dave Vizard. He really understands porting. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, Dulcich has done some really cool stuff. So we'll stop our poll now at 77% saying yes on the 400 horsepower flywheel. That would be interesting. Vizard did do the original A Series Mini stuff. Everybody should have read those books. He's done. I was just talking to him about his daughter who passed away, and running the Mini at some races and winning and doing all kinds of stuff. How high can you safely rev it? I don't know. I'm sure that guys are going to 7,500 or more on the L Series stuff, but I don't know. When people ask questions like that, I get concerned, because why do you want to rev it that high? It's not making power there. So I don't ever rev it that high unless it's making power there, and it's not. Neil, was that in his book, the economy stuff that he did? This motor makes peak power at like 5,500, so it's not an RPM motor. The guys at Engine Masters ran a Gen 3 Hemi with a carb, but they didn't get the flow numbers you got when you ran the M1 intake on the What I don't know what you mean by flow numbers. Did they flow test it or something? Is the M1 intake the low rise single plane intake that came from Dodge? If that's the case, that's not a good intake manifold. Do more of the Big Bang series. That is good stuff. The intake manifold is the biggest restriction besides the exhaust ports flowing poorly. The intake manifold is almost never the biggest restriction on a turbocharged application. What if we made a carburetor that had really small primaries for fuel economy, like a quadrajet, that had large secondaries, like a quadrajet, for when you want to get into the throttle? like a quadrijet, right? Could you try the limits on inline 5 Atlas? I need to finish the limits on the inline 6-cylinder Atlas. Why is it more cubes, lower peak horsepower RPM for a given cam? They don't. If you that, as it turns out, that's more a function of the displacement of the individual cylinder rather than the total displacement of the motor. Office needs a killer bee picture. We just haven't taken it out yet. I'm sure that there will be one. There'll be a place for it. You guys can't see it, but that's a red hat right there. Right there. Ever hear of I've heard of a Fairlady Z. I've driven one, as a matter of fact. 432. They had an engine called an S20. 4 valves, 3 carbs, 2 cams. Most collectible Z of all time. I'm not familiar with that. That's pretty cool. Not the topic, but since quadrigets are brought up, wish me luck on swapping one into a 351 Windsor F100 truck. Are you putting it on the Ford motor? Because as long as the intake will accept it, the quadrijet will work fine on any motor. I popped many head gaskets on my L28. I think I would have looked at the tune a little bit, maybe. Uh-oh, found the screwdriver on the motor. That's not good. Getting mid-20s with a well-tuned quadrijet is quite easy. My brother's done it with a W150. The fuel mileage will be less of a function of the carburetor than it will be of the vehicle that you're trying to get 20 miles per gallon in. And then obviously the gearing and the aero and the weight of the vehicle is kind of a big thing. Would ARP stud save the L28 head gaskets? Not if the tune was incorrect. Oh, we got some bots showing up. And you're out. Ended up lowering it and I broke a piston and said, you're not doing it because the parts are weak. You're doing it because the tune is not right. Yeah, they're out. W150 4x4 360 410 gears, 65 miles an hour, 22 miles per gallon. That's pretty good. That seems high with that combination. Richard just came across a 1960 Corvette. It has a 327, so obviously not an original motor. Any suggestions on? Yeah, I would take the plugs out and spin the motor around. If they'll let you take the, might be a good idea to take the distributor out and spin that to prime the oil pump, and then try to start it. Josh is 72 240. Nice. Swapping to a small block Chevy. I always wanted a small block Z. Yeah, Nathan, I think I've read that somewhere about keep blowing them up until you get the right tune and then put the good motor in. I think it would just make the tune right to begin with. Yeah, Neil, the guys from Engine Masters, and I've talked to Freiberger about this many times because I did a 5.7 versus a 6.0 rod on 3 different small blocks, and it didn't change the power at all. And when David's tested it on, I think he tested on big blocks maybe, um, they didn't see any change from rod length. I know that there's people on there that are going to argue about that and stuff. And I didn't see it when I tested it, and maybe it needs to be tested again. And maybe there are applications where it does change power, but people think that people go too far the other way. They think that changing rod length is like changing stroke. And when I say changing stroke, I mean changing stroke and keeping the bore the same, not juggling bore and stroke, which in my opinion have very little effect on power if displacement stays the same. Same thing with rod length. Same thing with flipping the piston. All of that stuff is like tiny stuff, if anything at all. Whereas if you change the displacement, or you change the compression, or you change the cam timing, or change the head flow, change the intake runner length, change the turbo size, all of that stuff, those are all big things. Jonathan, I reversed the pistons on my 318. I don't know if it did anything, but it felt snappier. Keep in mind that I also ported the head and the intake. I wonder which one of those did anything. Yeah, if you do a change and the change allows you to have a thicker ringland on the top, that's going to make the piston stronger. What plugs do you use on your turbo LS engine? We use a heat range, and depending on how much boost we're going to run, like an 8, 9, or 10. And I don't ever have idle problems or misfire problems or any of that, like while it's idling. I'm not driving it around in the car. We're just letting it idle there on the dyno. But even with a heat range 10 plug, there's a super cold plug, but we only have 19,000 spring gap in it, and so it jumps the gap every time. Casey, but if it moves the power up or down, that's a change and there's going to be a change in power somewhere. Will Dulcich let you have a crack at a torque storm supercharger? I don't know. He may be putting that in something. A JFC V8, basically a V8 Hayabusa. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, those are neat. That's like that V8 Honda motor that guy's building out of the. I think is he doing a K series ones? Two more minutes. Dos más minutos. The Hayabusa stuff is cool though, because the thing is that, well, I guess they have enough head flow to support each one of those 4 cylinders, especially if guys are reporting those. Yeah, too bad Dan's not here. He could comment on the Porsche 930. It's not a good car, especially the early ones, because they had no compression. They were like 6.5 to 1, especially the original non-intercooled ones, the very first ones. And they had, like, as you might imagine, had tremendous turbo lag, and then it all came on at once. And so and on lift throttle, like cornering attitude was not good. So if you go too hot into a corner and you lift off the throttle all of a sudden because you're scared and you're on the brake, what's going to happen? The back end's going to want to switch. It's going to want to switch from the front end. It's not good. Just completed my 69 Chevelle build. I had a hard time installing the TKX. It drives well, but what would be an indicator that I didn't align the bell housing correctly? How do you not align the bell housing correctly? Doesn't it have dowels on it? 3.8 Jake. So you swapped in a turbocharged Super Coupe motor. Cool, very cool. Stock timing is 20. Stock timing under boost is 26 degrees with that motor. Seems like a lot under boost to me. Non-intercooled, air-cooled engine on the 930. Yeah, the original ones were like that. They didn't get the turbo until the 3.3. I mean, didn't get the intercooler until the 3.3. Ever think of doing a VW 2-liter TSI engine? No, I've done some chassis dyno stuff on 1.8Ts, but not the 2-liter. 93 octane and an intercooler. I don't see how that combination under boost could want more than 26 degrees of timing. I know nothing about the 3800 stuff on the Ford side, but judging by what we ran on the 3800 GM motor, which is probably similar, and all of the other turbo stuff that I've run, I don't know that I've ever run 26 degrees on something. Well, I take that back. I have run 26 degrees. We've run 30 degrees on some of the supercharged and turbocharged, like big block V8s, but they wanted 40 degrees of timing NA. So we're able to run 10 or 11 or 12 degrees less timing under boost because we were running E85 and or race gas, and it was intercooled, or we were blowing through a carburetor. But only if that thing wanted a lot of timing NA, and I don't see how it can with that size motor. And the Turbo Carrera actually came after the original Turbo. It's on a Mustang ECU. So I don't know, maybe you haven't verified the timing on the, like if you verified TDC and then verified the timing while the thing's running, maybe you're not getting what you think you are. The L28 wants mid-20s. That's probably where I would have tried. I don't know. And that would be the benefit of running the thing NA to begin with, which is why I liked it. One of the reasons I like to do that. If I run it NA and run the timing and just start going up in timing for whatever it wants, and it will tell me. We'll get to a point where it stops making power. So whatever that is, if that's like 30, let's say, then we know that 20 is probably kind of a real number. If it's 40, then we go, well, we can go to 25 or 26 or 28 or whatever. If it only wants 25 degrees NA, then I'm not going to go to 20 because that's too close to the 2, especially under boost, especially under higher boost. So finding out what the thing runs NA, what it wants NA, gives me a really good idea on what the thing's going to want under boost. My suspicion, like this gentleman said here, and like Nathan said, that a 7.5 to 1, 2.8 liter motor, I don't know how good the combustion chamber is, but it's probably going to want a lot of timing. Yeah, thanks, Dean. I've got about 30 books up there on Porsche, so I'm pretty familiar with those. Anytime I pull anything apart and reassemble it, I verify TDC. I almost never do that on LS stuff. If I get a junkyard LS motor, we put it on there, we just run it and see what happens. Even under boost, like this L33, I've never verified TDC on it. But we also don't just put the timing at the timing where we think it should be. We start low and then start sneaking up on it slowly. So again, I'm carrying more that, okay, we just added a degree. Did it like that? Yes. Okay, we're going in the right direction. We added another degree. Did it like it? Yes. We keep going in that direction. Not like, because some people are like, oh, they all run best at 32 degrees. So let's just put 32 in. I'm like, hang on there. That's not the way to do it. I don't care if that's ultimately going to be where we get to. We're going to get there smartly. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do a little bit at a time, and we're going to make sure everything's right and make sure the motor's happy. And it will start telling us that it's not happy before it becomes really unhappy. Is there anything to setting timing with a vacuum gauge? You mean, can you adjust the timing to optimize like idle strength or something with the timing? Yeah, it will tell you when it's happiest at idle if the vacuum is the highest. But that's not the way we normally do it. The 935, yeah, the slope nose ones, yeah. 2 minutes, 8 minutes ago. I highly recommend fresh squeezed orange juice for everybody. It's very good. Are there any good front engine Porsches? I like them. I owned a 924 Porsche, and I wish that I had a 944 Turbo because I really like those. And I kind of have a soft spot for 928s also. I've never owned one and would like one maybe with an LS swap in it. But I was just reading my 928 book up there. I like when Al Holbert took that car out and took it out to Bonneville. And it went like 171 or something, so they set a like production record. Yeah, Onion, a 700 horsepower 930 turbo that went 200 miles an hour. You think that that's about like 200 horsepower too much to only go 200? A 944 turbo is a really good car. I would rather drive one of those on the track than any kind of 911. I think that they're a lot better balanced, and you can make a lot of power with them. I like the fact that obviously that they're water cooled, even though the later 911s and stuff, 968s and the variants are all water cooled after a certain period of time. But I like the 944s, and then you can make a lot of power with them. Carl's 914.6. Carl was a fantastic guy. We battled with Carl for many years on the at the Silver State to see who would finish the race. And you're done. We're going to do the 3800. Okay, guys. we went overtime. Thank you guys all for showing up. More videos coming up. Obviously, now that I have the internet back, I can get back to work and make some power. And hopefully we'll see a Nova burnout video. Yes, Foreign Auto, I'm talking to you. We'll see that fairly soon, and we'll be able to say, hey, look, the Nova went to the right home. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.